I want to welcome everybody tonight for what is now the second talk in an ongoing speaker series that the Linden Hills Neighborhood Council has partnered with the Minneapolis Office of Immigration and Refugee Affairs. It's called Communities in Crisis in This Together, Immigrants and Refugees. I am the Executive Director of Linden Hills Neighborhood Council. We have with us tonight as a facilitator, the Director of the Minneapolis Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs.
It's a mouthful.
Michelle Rivero. And we're very excited to have Veena Iyer here with us tonight as the guest speaker. She is the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, which is a nonprofit agency. It provides immigration legal assistance to low-income immigrants and refugees in Minnesota. It also works to educate Minnesota communities and professionals about immigration matters and advocates for state and federal policies which respect the universal human rights of immigrants. I wanted to get all that in. And Michelle, the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs, they opened in July 2018, and that office supports the city's initiatives to welcome, support, and defend the city's immigrants and refugee communities. So that's some amazing work that they're doing. The goals of these talks, this series of talks, is really to just bring awareness to the challenges that are being faced by the immigrant and refugee community members who are here in the city with us and in the state with us, to shine a light on organizations like Veena's who are doing work, and actually like Michelle's, who are doing work to meet the needs of these communities, and then also to talk about how people who may not be in those communities but want to get involved, who want to have impact, how they can do that. So I wanted to welcome and thank both Veena and Michelle. I wanted to go over some etiquette rules. We want everybody to stay on mute during the main parts of the talk. However, there will be throughout opportunities for question and answer. Feel free to post your question in the chat. Michelle can ask that question, or if you'd like to ask it yourself, just utilize the hand raising function, which you can find by clicking on participants, which should be along the bottom of your screen, and then it should be a choice over to your right in the navigation. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Michelle.
Super. Thank you so much, Becky. And thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this series. Really happy to share information with community and very grateful that Veena is able to be with us today. I wanted to quickly talk a little bit about the relationship between the City of Minneapolis and Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. As some of the people on this meeting may know, the City of Minneapolis has partnerships with several immigration legal service organizations with the purpose of ensuring that people are not prevented from accessing competent immigration legal advice and support based on an inability to pay for those legal services. So we're very fortunate to have Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota as one of our legal service partners. ILCM, in addition to participating in information sessions, also provides full legal representation, consultations, as well as full legal representation to individuals in a variety of immigration-related matters, including residents of the city of Minneapolis. So I will kick it over to you, Veena, to talk more about what we're going to talk about today and what we're going to see today. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much to Becky, the council, and of course, Michelle, for organizing this and for just providing such great leadership in our cities, in our neighborhoods, to make sure that we're ensuring that our cities, that our state, our country are welcoming to immigrants and refugees. I think it's particularly appropriate that we're talking today because it's Welcoming Week. So it's a week across the nation in order to welcome and celebrate immigrants and refugees and make sure that immigrants and refugees feel welcome here in our communities. In addition, today in particular is Citizenship Day. So today is the day we celebrate naturalization, citizenship, the ability to make a new home here, become a citizen, and fully participate in our democracy. So some of what we'll talk about today is going to be about that. And in fact, that's going to be really captured in what we're going to see first off. We were very fortunate, ILCM was very fortunate last year to be selected by Visionaries, which is a documentary filmmaker, to be the subject of a documentary about our work here in Minnesota and across Minnesota. We provide services across the states through offices in St. Paul, in Moorhead, in Austin, and in Worthington, and we provided assistance last year in over 4,000 unique cases. So we assisted in 4,000 unique cases last year, and so the documentary was done about us and about our organization. We're really excited about it. It's going to be premiering on Prairie Public, which is up in Moorhead, this Sunday, and then later this fall, it's actually going to be premiering on one of the TPT networks on, I think, the Minnesota channel. So definitely we'll provide some information to send us your email so we can keep you updated about how to see the full documentary, which you also might have seen that Becky sent you. But if you'd like to see the premiere, we'd love to have you see it. The other piece is that today we're just going to look at a few snippets from it. So the first one that Becky has queued up is a little bit about our naturalization work, and I think really captures the tremendous impact that naturalization has on families. So I'll turn it over to Becky to run the tape.
¿Cómo estás, Martita?
Bien, bien, ¿cómo estás?
Pues verte como
Bien,
siempre.
Sí. Guapa como siempre. Ok.
Gracias.
Ahora, esta es la aplicación para la solicitud de ciudadanía para esta.
I came here when I was 16 years old. My brother and I actually came 6 months after my mom came. We were blessed with other people around us that helped us move to a state where they could help us, and that was in Minnesota.
Oh, sí, ¿verdad? Eso no Since we came here, it's almost now going to be like 10 years. And we're still doing things with Martha. She has been, by her side all this time.
Esta forma es
When we're going through the process for the green card, she explained to us every step that we had to take to do the things legally and right.
I was in high school and starting to apply for colleges, and I needed that. I needed that green card to be able to register for college. I was able to study in this country. I was able to graduate.
After the laws start to change and all that, we think be a citizen, she will be necessary because this is kind of our home now. So Martha applied for us in whatever interviews that we have with the immigration service. She's beside us. The day that my son and I passed our test and we went to the ceremony, I think it was only he and I as Colombian there, So when they say Colombia, we're here. And now we're doing the process for my daughter.
Tomas el juramento. Qué alegría.
Yeah. I've been waiting for the letter, which it actually came just recently. And so I will be joining the people in St. Paul and doing the oath in December. So it'll be really great.
Es la que te tardaste
Por
más.
fin. Oh, ya era tanto tiempo.
Sí.
Ya era.
Oh my gosh, that was awesome. I
Yeah.
didn't realize they were Colombian. My dad's Colombian, so that's kind of a cool connection. And maybe I'll just ask a couple of questions, Veena, if that's okay?
That's
Okay,
great.
super. So I know that naturalization is an important part of your family's story. Could you tell us a little bit about your parents' experience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my parents immigrated from India, or my dad immigrated from India in 1969. It was just a few years after the Immigration and Nationality Act really opened the doors to immigration, particularly from Africa and Asia that had been cut off for almost a century. And my father came here to Minnesota in order to go to school at the U to get a graduate degree. So that's the first way that he got here. And actually, I think if Becky is able to screen share, she can put up a fun picture of my dad's passport when he first came here with his student visa.
Place for me to be. I am the child of Indian immigrants.
Oh, actually, it's funny.
My
Bill
father immigrated
might
here
talk about
to
this
the
as
Twin
well.
Cities in 1969 in order to go to the University of Minnesota.
That was awesome. That was actually completely unintended. That my that the video from the video would correspond with the PowerPoint, but in fact it was perfect.
That ILCM was really the leader in this community in advocating for the rights of immigrants and refugees.
Becky, is there any way to put off the sound
that were facing the immigrant and refugee communities here in Minnesota? Who was speaking about them? It was ILCM.
Well, you guys also got to hear why it is that I joined ILCM. But my dad came here, and then my dad became a citizen actually about almost 10 years later. After he had obtained residence through an employer. He had sponsored my mom to come here once they got married, but he really wanted to reunite with his family, with his brothers and sisters, his parents. But for him to be able to do that, he needed to become a citizen so that he could sponsor them to come here. So that's what he did. He became a citizen about 2 months before I was born, and I became the first U.S.-born citizen in my family. My mom, on the other hand, didn't want to give up her Indian citizenship right away. She felt kind of this really big connection to my grandmother, who was back in India. So she actually did not become a citizen until 2008. And she is unabashed in the reasons that she became a citizen. And it was to vote. She just wanted to so deeply to vote in the 2008 election that she went out, she became a citizen, she voted absentee, and then she came up to Chicago with me and did voter protection, her very first election.
That's so exciting. You know, it's interesting sort of comparing the application process of our parents. My parents naturalized as well, and sort of what things are like today. Can you just walk us through a little bit about the naturalization application process?
Yes, absolutely. So the process is, I think it can appear quite simple, but really depending on your family situation can be quite complicated. So the simple pieces are that you do have to be a lawful permanent resident or have a green card. For most people, you have to have that green card for about 5 years, but there are certain communities for which they can be shorter. So for refugees, for asylees, as well as certain spouses of U.S. citizens. The second main requirement is that you have to have good moral character. Generally, that's the absence of certain criminal convictions. There are certain non-criminal things that can go against having good moral character as well, but really oftentimes it's a criminal conviction of some sort. And third, you have to pass the English and the civics tests, which I will actually you know, I'm gonna, in just a second, I'm gonna actually post the questions, just because I think it's really fascinating to do them. Because I think a lot of people oftentimes don't realize that the questions can be difficult. I think they're not supposed to be, but I found a lot of people who've gone through high school physics and say, oh my gosh, I did not know that. And so that's what you have to do to become a citizen. Then you take the oath, which ordinarily would happen at a courthouse, sometimes actually over at the Excel Center, but now has been happening outdoors. So we'll see how those happen when it gets a little colder. And I said earlier, citizenship applications can be a complicated process, especially right now when our administration is really essentially taking an opportunity during naturalization applications to really re-examine and re-adjudicate almost every prior decision in an individual's immigration case. And that's the reason why we very highly recommend that applicants for citizenship consult with a qualified immigration attorney before applying. You may end up having a consult, and it might be something that you can end up doing on your own, but for a lot of people, there's little things that come up and make it so it would be better to work with an attorney. And so we encourage people to call us and to call other legal services providers.
Super. And that actually leads to another question. People talk a lot about the barriers to acquisition of citizenship. Can you talk a bit about what barriers you see in acquiring citizenship?
Yeah. When it comes to barriers, I kind of divide it into two sets of barriers. When I think about it, there are the barriers that have been around for a very long time. And then there's the barriers that are unique to now, and particularly to this administration. So the first set of barriers that have been around for a while are just frankly completing the form. Even if you have a pretty decent understanding of English, if you have a high school education, that form can be complicated, and there can be some really difficult questions on it, such as, have you perpetrated persecution? Have you engaged in prostitution? I'm amazed when I'm asking that certain questions to my clients. They'll always be like, "What? Have I used a prostitute? Have I?" Kind of amazed that you're asking this question. That can get confusing. The second is it's hard to get legal assistance. I think for those folks who really need legal assistance in these processes, it can be difficult to find an attorney, an affordable attorney to assist. Next, paying the application fee. Even now, it's about $500, actually $595. It's hard for a lot of families to pay that application. There's a fee waiver available right now, but we're going to talk about that in a second. And then the other thing is just right now with COVID-19, the very, very long wait times for both adjudication, waiting for interviews, waiting for oaths, that's a result of the pandemic. And you might have seen news reports that there are estimates of tens of thousands of immigrants who are very, very close to becoming citizens, and under other circumstances would have become citizens and been able to vote in this election, who may not be able to because of the pandemic, and frankly because USCIS, in a lot of ways, I think, dragged its feet in being able to at least start up remote interviews, et cetera, for clients who wanted to naturalize.
Okay, thanks for that. And you're starting to talk about the fees and the fee waivers, and there's a lot of talk about fees going up in October, so just a couple of weeks away. Can you talk a little bit more about that and the impact that has on a person's ability to naturalize?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I said, there's kind of these two sets of barriers, the ones that I think have been around for a long time and those that are a result of this administration. So one of the big things is about a year ago, the administration proposed regulations that would drastically increase the naturalization fees from about $600 to $1,200, and also eliminate most fee waivers. This is the biggest fee increase in the history of immigration. It's so high that one of the things I asked my dad is, he became a citizen in 1978. And I asked him, I was like, do you remember how much you paid to become a citizen? And he said, I don't know, but I can't imagine that it was more than like, say, $50. So, he really did not pay that much money at all. In addition, so this is really going to be putting citizenship and voting beyond the reach of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of moderate income families. Here in Minnesota, the median income for immigrant-led households is $55,000. So if you've got two immigrant parents, two citizen children, they're going to have to come up with $2,400, probably double or triple their rent or mortgage for the parents to become citizens. So that's a really big burden for moderate income families to bear.
That's
the
incredible.
Other piece, yeah, it is. It is incredible. And I think the other piece is that it's the elimination of those fee waivers. Mm-hmm. So for as long as I can remember, and I think as long as most immigration advocates can remember, there have been fee waivers. But starting October 2nd, USCIS is eliminating virtually all fee waivers for naturalization applications. And to me, the reason you have a fee waiver is to make sure that ability to pay does not interfere with somebody's ability to become a citizen and to vote in the democracy that they call their own. And the vast majority of our clients qualify for and obtain fee waivers, but if they are not available, a very large number of lawful permanent residents simply won't take that next step of applying for citizenship, which has real implications for our communities. We have a lot of evidence that shows that citizenship results in higher wages, higher rates of home ownership. All of that increases the tax base, helps our communities, helps our local communities, our state communities, even the federal government. And so that's going to have a real financial impact, but also a real morale impact for our communities. And here in Minnesota, that's about 67,000 LPRs in Minnesota who are eligible to naturalize. Those numbers increase every day, but few and fewer are going to be able to with these changes.
Yeah, and actually, just from the standpoint of City of Minneapolis, we've looked at some statistics. There's the University of Southern California page, Dornsife, where you can look at eligible to naturalize maps. And for the City of Minneapolis, it's almost 9,000 people who are eligible to naturalize. So significant impact for the City of Minneapolis. And I want to make sure that people note that in the chat is ILCM's amazing fact sheet on the immigration fee increases, which has been a really good resource to clearly indicate to people what kind of an impact this has on a variety of different applications, including the citizenship application. And I know that you have that available in other languages too, correct, in the event that people need it.
We do, Michelle. Yes, we try our very best to have all of our fact sheets available in a variety of languages so that people can, that a wide variety of folks can access them.
And Veena, you know, another barrier that may come in the future is making the English and the civics tests more, as if the civics test wasn't hard enough, but let's hear about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a pilot right now to make the civics and English test more difficult. And again, you know, I liken it to the literacy tests that really were in place long through the 60s in order to prevent people from voting. So again, trying to cut off that access to citizenship and that access to the ability to really participate in the democracy and as a citizen. So that's a pilot right now. There's a possibility of those of changes to the test happening as early as December of 2020, but that also is going to stop a lot of folks from becoming citizens.
So yikes. So what can people do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there's a number of things that folks can do. One of the things is that talk to your congresspeople, talk to your senators at the federal level. Unfortunately, naturalization changes are something that really is something that the federal government gets to decide. And so it's really important to let your elected officials know that you believe that the fees, et cetera, shouldn't be changed, and that we should really be promoting and encouraging immigrants to be citizens, not trying to stop folks from kind of getting done with that pathway to citizenship. I think the second thing is really support, you know, in the absence of really strong leadership in support of immigrants and refugees at the federal level, we have always relied on states and local governments to do the right thing by all of their residents, all of their communities. And so I think it's really important to support efforts by our state and local governments, by foundations, by others, in order to raise money and or provide low-cost loans to pay for legal assistance, to complete naturalization forms, as well as to pay for filing fees as well. If you're an attorney, or if you know or love an attorney, frankly, you don't even have to know or love them. You just have to, well, actually, you have to know them. You don't have to love them. You can please just let them know that they can volunteer as a pro bono attorney to assist folks with naturalization applications. And I'm just going to ask a shout to Mari to see if she might be able to put up the link to our volunteer and pro bono opportunities. And finally, you don't have to be an attorney to assist and support immigrants and refugees. One thing I think that is a great way to support the community is to volunteer to teach English or civics classes to new immigrants through our partner Literacy Minnesota. And actually, that's part of the way that I got involved with this work. My very first job out of college, where I met my husband, was working at a community center in Chicago, where I ran the English literacy program for low-income South Asian Americans in our community. So it's absolutely a great way to get to know the community and give back.
And find love.
And find love. I would recommend it.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Veena. And I think it's so timely that we're talking about how to acquire citizenship and the barriers to citizenship, because today is Citizenship Day. If people are interested in doing a deeper dive, I just want to mention that there was a Facebook Live event this morning that is on the City of Minneapolis Facebook page. that includes me, my counterpart from St. Paul, Edmundo Lijo, and a representative from the International Institute of Minnesota, talking in more detail about the benefits to the individual, to the community of acquisition of citizenship, and barriers to citizenship as well, with some interesting stats and links too. So if there are questions that people have, please feel free to put them into the chat now, or I think you can raise your hand if you want, or just go ahead and ask it. We'll give a couple of minutes for questions before we transition to the next subject, which I believe is DACA. So if you have a question about, a burning question about citizenship, or if you want us to ask you one of the civics questions to test your high school civics, we can spend a minute doing that too. So I'll just leave a minute open in the event that people want to raise their hands or just ask a question if you've got one. Or if there's anything I forgot to ask you, Veena.
Oh no, I was just going to share on the civics test. I will also say that one of the great things you can do as either a volunteer or even as somebody who is just helping a family member with studying for the civics test, you can always encourage them to learn more than they have to. As I did to one of my best friend's grandmothers, I helped her with studying for the civics test, and I was very angry at that time that she only needed to learn about Chief Justice Rehnquist, and I was like, why should she only learn about the guy? And so I made her learn about Justice O'Connor and Justice Ginsburg, and since then, that was 20 years ago, every time she sees me, the first thing she says is, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sandra Day O'Connor. So one of the highlights of helping people learn civics.
That's awesome. That is an awesome story. So again, feel free to put your questions into the chat. You know, we really want this to be a back and forth and want to be responsive to questions that people have. But we'll transition here to a conversation about DACA. One of the biggest topics in immigration over the last several years, and this year too, since there have been so many developments, has been DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival. So Veena, can you give us some orientation around the state of DACA?
Yeah, absolutely. So DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, is a program that was created in 2012 by the Obama administration to support young dreamers. So young people who came here as children, who have completed high school, and who really have no other home than the United States. The Trump administration tried to end the program in 2017, and that was quickly challenged in the courts. I'm going to talk a little bit about the decision and the aftermath in just a moment. But before really launching in, I think it's really important to start by having you listen to the words of one of our clients, a DACA recipient who was featured in the documentary about our organization, to make sure that we're first centered in the personal and lived experience of the dreamer community before we kind of get into the law. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky.
My name is Jose Duran. I am 23 years old. Currently, I study economics at the University of Minnesota. I first met ILCM in 2012 when DACA first came out. They organized like kind of like a rally or like a meeting at this school, and like so many people went, and like everyone was just like sitting in the bleachers, and like people were talking about what was going to happen, what we were going to do, and like how they were going to try to help. The first time I applied for DACA was through ILCM. It's an opportunity for me to work, to continue learning and educating myself. It's something my parents don't have, which I need to take advantage of because, you know, it's what we came here for, you know, just to take advantage of opportunities, and this is an opportunity. I don't really remember much of Mexico. I was there up until 3. I don't remember visiting my grandma, like going to the stores. I don't remember that. But what I do remember is like very like vivid like images of us like actually crossing the border. On the third time that we tried to cross, we crossed the fence, and since I was 3, I was with the guide. He was like holding my hand all the time. The Border Patrol was driving, caught us, and then everyone stayed back and was just kind of like hiding in bushes as they saw me and the guide getting taken away. We got detained, we got sent back to Mexico. It was just him and I, and my parents decided to move forward, and they ended up crossing in the US. They got to like this motel. The guide ended up reaching out to the hotel in hopes that my parents would be there, and they were there, and he basically said that, hey, you know, I'm gonna bring your son the next day, just wait there, don't move. And then we've kind of been here since. Growing up in Minnesota, I just remember like being sheltered a lot. We really wouldn't go anywhere. We never went on family vacations. We would hesitate to go to certain areas in Minneapolis because of something someone said, that the ICE is gonna be there or something like that. It's just this constant fear you live in. You don't really know what's gonna happen. I don't know what's gonna happen with like my parents, because within a couple years they're gonna try to apply for citizenship, and if they get denied, they might get sent back to Mexico for 10 years. Things aren't fixed, things aren't set in stone. DACA is always up in the air, it's always in the news. It could get removed and revoked, it could continue on forever. It's quite difficult to fully depict a future where I am comfortable saying, hey, this is what I want to do in 10 years or 5 years.
So that captures so well the uncertainty of the lives that DACA beneficiaries face. And I know that this is a little bit dated already because the Supreme Court decision has come out. So can you walk us through what happened and where things are at right now, Veena?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, I think it's interesting, like when the decision first came out, Jose was one of our clients who was, I think, interviewed for a couple of news outlets about how his feelings about the decision and how thrilled he was, and rightfully so. I mean, I was screaming in my house, and so we were thrilled because the decision that came down from the Supreme Court was that although they've concluded that the administration had the authority to end DACA, they had failed to do so properly. And so in light of that decision, frankly, we thought that what was going to happen, we knew that we weren't out of the woods, but we did believe that U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services should have listened to the Supreme Court and have begun just roll back. You know, if they said that it was ended improperly, then we were right back where we were in 2017. And where we were in 2017 is that initial DACA applications were accepted and they should have been accepted as soon as the decision came down from the Supreme Court, or they decided to do what the Supreme Court said if they wanted to continue and try to end DACA and just end DACA properly. They didn't do either. What USCIS did is that they issued a memorandum restricting the program further. And among those restrictions were that they said that they were going to continue to reject all pending initial requests, even though they hadn't ended DACA properly, and they acknowledged that they were still taking the time to figure out how to do it. Second, that they would only process DACA renewals for a 1-year period rather than a 2-year period, meaning that applicants are going to be subjected to a $495 filing fee, for which there is no fee waiver available even now, every year. And then also means that what's called advanced parole requests from DACA recipients, the ability to leave the country for some reason, to get a permission to leave the country, is not available except under exceptional circumstances. In the days pre-COVID, this was used to the DACA recipients who were in, say, college or law school, or, you know, I read about the first DACA recipient to have won, I think, a Rhodes Scholarship, so that they could leave and to be able to go and study. And that's just not available to them, not because of COVID, but because of the way that the DHS has implemented policy. There's a number of challenges that are pending, so this isn't the last word. So we're hopeful that, of course, we would like something more permanent, which we're going to talk about in a second, but that while we have DACA, we are hopeful that as a result of legal challenges, we'll get back to where we were, and that those tens of thousands of young people, including at least, I think, 5,000 here in Minnesota, who would be eligible for DACA if it hadn't ended in 2017, will be able to get some protection, some security, and be able to start moving on with their lives.
Super. Thanks for sharing that. So if people are interested in supporting Dreamers, what can they do?
So the very first thing is call your legislators and make sure that your friends and family call your legislators to pass the DREAM Act. That's passed the House, it hasn't passed the Senate, and it's a key to really creating a permanent pathway to citizenship for our Dreamer community. I also think that it is absolutely critical that when the next congressional session starts, the DREAM Act and comprehensive immigration reform have to be at the top of the agenda for Congress. It just has to be. It has to be in that top, couple of like that first 100-day plan. And so I think that's something else that we can really be pushing for, is making sure that that is at the top of the agenda for whatever administration is in place next. Next, I think it's also very, very, oh, wait, I just have a question from Steve. Is the Senate even looking at it, at the DREAM Act? Yes, they are. I think the issue at the Senate level, of course, is that there have been some indication by certain senators that they would support it, but the problem is that the administration and the kind of Republican side will only take it if there's really draconian limitations that are placed on immigration, building of a wall, etc., in exchange. So that's the difference. I think, to be more precise, we want a clean DREAM Act. We want a clean DREAM Act and an immigration legislation that's forward-looking as to kind of next, what we need for immigration in the future. I think it's really important to support efforts by state and local governments, again, by foundations and others, to raise money to provide and to support DACA applicants, both in application fees as well as, again, with providing legal services to assist DACA recipients. So kind of the type of services that ILCM and other organizations provide. And then again, if you're an attorney, know an attorney, don't need to love an attorney, volunteer as a pro bono attorney with our organization to assist folks with DACA renewals. And the important thing is now that folks have to renew every year rather than once every 2 years, we know that we're going to see an influx of clients who are coming in and needing services and needing support. And we want to make absolutely sure that our DACA recipients get support. If they've had any small issues in between DACA renewals, we want to help them with them, assist them to make sure that they can address them before they renew.
Super, thanks. And I just want to elevate the assisting people who need help with their filing fees point, because, and I know, Veena, this predates your tenure as executive director at ILCM, but perhaps people who are in the audience may remember that a few years ago, there was a news piece on Minnesota Public Radio about a DACA beneficiary who couldn't afford to pay his filing fee. And the attorney for that individual actually went on NPR and talked about this situation and ended up receiving a check to cover the filing fee, which is very beautiful and turned into a much larger, many acts of generosity. And I know the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota was involved in that, where people who donated money for Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota clients who were DACA applicants, it enabled them to pay their application fees. And I don't remember the exact amount of money, but it was in the tens of thousands of dollars. It was a very meaningful effort and did get some media attention. So
yeah.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. And yes, and absolutely. And that is absolutely possible. And I'll actually see if Mari, if you might be able to put up the DACA donate page. So we have two parts of kind of the support that we provide to our DACA clients. So first of all, we provide legal assistance. So we assist with making sure that we're reviewing to make sure that the individual doesn't have any issues with renewing, because obviously we do not want folks to be put into deportation proceedings or any other type of proceedings. If they are renewing their DACA, we assist them with filing the application, get it off, etc. All of that work we do for, we don't charge at all, but when we really analyze it, it's $600 to do a DACA application. And then in addition, and there's absolutely ways to support that work that we do and our attorneys and our staff do, our pro bono attorneys do. In addition, there's that $495 filing fee. And so one of the things that, because we are the biggest provider of free legal services to DACA recipients, we have long had a fund that if folks want to donate, they can also donate for filing fees. So that is also something that's an option if folks are so moved, for $495. And so, when you add it up, $1,100 gives a lot of certainty to a young person, that young person's family that we know has a lot of has U.S. citizen children, oftentimes U.S. citizen spouses, and can get them through another year to be able to support their family by having employment authorization and the security of knowing that they're hopefully not going to be deported soon.
Yeah, I think one thing that's helpful for people to know too is length of residence and being in DACA status. Or having DACA, that doesn't actually lead to a pathway to citizenship automatically. So you're basically in this limbo situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's limbo. It's absolutely limbo. And yeah, that's why we need to have a more permanent pathway. Congress can do it. They did it last year at the end of December for Liberians, another really big community here that we're assisting, that other organizations are assisting, because those folks who are on another kind of limbo status called, many were on a limbo status called temporary protected status, or DED, are now eligible for a pathway to citizenship. Unfortunately, it's been really hard for the community to apply in the last year. There's a lot of hurdles that they've faced, but there's a pathway. It's a time-limited pathway for this year, but there's a pathway. So Congress can do it. This Congress can do it. They just need to get the pressure and get the right people in the room who can really figure out a solution. And they did it.
Mm-hmm. Great. So I don't know if anyone has questions. I'm going to pause briefly here in the event that people have questions before we transition to other topics. I think it's wonderful to have you here, Veena, to share updates in other areas that people may not be aware of, or even things that are in the news, kind of sharing a little more information about things like people in detention and how people are being treated, because that is a subject of note. Oh, and I see a question here from Steve. How many DACA kids are in Minneapolis schools? I do not have an exact figure for you. And part of the reason has to do with confidentiality issues in terms of inquiring around immigration status. I'm happy to send over an estimate of the number of DACA beneficiaries in the city of Minneapolis. And I believe it's 400, but I'm not 100% sure. I can circle back and give you that information. Were there any other questions that people had? Okay, thanks, Steve.
I just had a question. This isn't exactly about DACA, but you had mentioned TPS, and I feel like I just read that there are some changes to TPS as well. And I was just wondering if we could talk about that briefly, because I feel like that's pretty impactful as well.
Yes, I'm happy to talk about those changes. And I'm actually going to, if Marty has a second, if she might be able to put up our fact sheet on that as well. Hopefully that will be helpful. But yes, what happened is the administration has really taken efforts to try to end TPS, and it's a temporary status that's available for individuals who are from countries that have experienced some sort of crisis. Usually it's a humanitarian crisis, either a natural disaster or political. And so the administration has tried to end end TPS recently. And what happens is there's been a couple of different decisions on it of late. And what those decisions do is it's kind of a combination of different things depending on what country the individual is from. And in fact, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna pull up our fact sheet so that I don't I don't misstate it. That's why I love our fact sheet.
Awesome.
But the big thing with it is that this latest decision was that the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals overruled a decision that that kind of stopped Homeland Security from ending TPS for residents of El Salvador, Nicaragua, Haiti, and Sudan. So those are 4 countries for which TPS is available. But what it also does is but even the underlying DHS decision to end TPS was not immediate. It was still giving several months for people to be able to leave. Now, there's going to be appeals, I think, in that case. In addition, there's a couple of other cases that are pending with regard to individuals from El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Haiti who are in TPS, and another involving Nepalese and Hondurans, another one just for Haitians. So there's like a kind of a combination of cases happening in various parts of the country. And so the decision earlier this week was just in one lawsuit. Because there's other lawsuits pending, we'll see what they decide, and especially if there is a contradictory decision between them, we will probably see it going up to the Supreme Court. So it's something that's not a great decision in the interim, but not something that's a final decision, and so we'll see how things move.
Thanks for that question, and thanks for that info. And I think it's wonderful that ILCM has a fact sheet up so quickly. That is amazing. I will also just briefly mention that one organization in the Twin Cities area that's doing a lot of advocacy around temporary protected status is COPAL, C-O-P-A-L. They actually had a press conference earlier today on TPS. And I believe that's one of the organizations I mentioned the last time we spoke, was on that list of organizations. So are there any other questions before we move on? Just gonna give it 30 seconds. So if you want to raise your hand or ask your question. I'm trying to embrace the silence, you know?
Oh, thanks so much, Steve. Oh, thank you for being, thank you, Oliver, for like learning about these issues.
That's wonderful. Okay, so there has been a lot of reporting the last couple of days about detention and incredible news about medical treatment in detention. So can you walk us through that a little bit? What's going on here in Minnesota? If you can give us a bit of an orientation.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's happening here in Minnesota? So first of all, there's horrendous things that have been reported out of Georgia right now. The forced hysterectomies and ICE detention, they've been shocking. Inadequate medical care. I think the thing that's really unfortunate is that it is awfully egregious. It is unfortunately unsurprising because we've seen such a long history of neglect and maltreatment in our jail systems. Here in Minnesota, we don't have private detention as they have in Georgia. Instead, ICE has contracted with county jails, and most immigration detainees are held at Sherburne, that's up a little bit north, Kaneohe, Freeborn, and Nobles County Jail. So those are the main places that we saw immigration detention. With regard, prior to COVID, we have really seen a lot of different reports of mistreatment and lack of, I think particularly lack of medical treatment that has been provided to immigrants and refugees who are detained. And so that's been, I think, very, very difficult for family members and individuals who are trying to make sure that their loved ones are good. And so that's like denial of like diabetes care, kind of solitary treatment, et cetera, which should not be provided. Not taking sufficient measures to protect folks in COVID has been something that we have just seen a lot of people be very, very, very concerned about, because it's absolutely been something that we've seen in a lot of places, and particularly here right now. And I think with regard to COVID, one of the things that is, I think, particularly concerning for us and for our communities is just the fact that despite numerous calls, there have been no action that has been taken in order to really systematically release folks from detention. And I think one of the things that's so important about that is that this is at a time when you don't. This is at a time when there are prosecutors' officers, including here and elsewhere, that are trying so hard to release detainees and make sure that we are really not, we don't have folks that are in detention that don't need to be, and who are at really significant risk of being harmed. And so those are some of the things that are really an issue. At Sherburne County Jail, a lot of immigrant detainees have indicated that they have not had COVID testing. And as we know and was reported in the Sahan Journal this week, that there are individuals, among them our clients, who are scheduled to be deported to Somalia, who had signs of COVID, and who were potentially going to be deported on a plane, and then deported. And so we just really don't have that consideration for the health of inmates and the health of detainees. I see Michelle, I think that you're on speak.
Yep, I was muted, sorry. So I know that this issue mobilizes a lot of people, and I wanted to share the ICE page that indicates a number of people who are or who have tested positive for COVID in detention. And right now, for the St. Paul area, there's one detention facility listed, which is Freeborn County, and they're indicating that there have been 4 people. So no one presently, that's what they're saying, but that there have been 4 people. So either they've been released from custody or removed, I don't know. But if people want to keep track, that is a place to check regularly. And Steve has a question: if an immigrant here gets picked up, what happens to them? Do they stay local? Are they able to be tracked? Who advocates for them? Great questions. Is
Absolutely.
the facility just ICE, or are they in a mixed facility with other detainees?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that. I'm going to expound on one little thing that Michelle said with regard to COVID, and I just want to make sure that everybody recognizes this. That literally, so what happens with immigration detainees is that they often are really it's the only type of case that's still happening in immigration court. And so there are times when they're brought into the immigration court to be booked. And there are times when, very rare circumstances, but for example, my staff does go to immigration court once in a while. And literally the immigration courts will not inform anybody if there has been a positive COVID test. They'll close down for a couple of days. Everybody figures out through the rumor mill that there probably was somebody with COVID there, but they do not tell anybody, even their staff, that there was somebody who had COVID who was tested there. So so contrary to what most institutions are doing in order to protect the public, to protect their constituents, is what's happening in immigration courts and through ICE. So I just wanted to highlight that. In response to Steve's excellent question, what happens with most detainees is that they are kept here in Minnesota at one of the different facilities that's here. And what happens is, you asked about who advocates them. Well, we try our darndest too. So our Immigrant Law Center is part of a group of kind of a consortium of organizations called the Minnesota Detention Project. So that includes us. It includes the Advocates for Human Rights. the Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid, and the Binger Center at the University of Minnesota, which is the immigration law clinic there. All of us work together, both to provide what's called legal orientation presentations at the jails. So that's to inform folks about their legal rights, help them understand what their options are, and do intakes in order to determine whether we might be able to assist them with their case. And then, of course, we represent folks both in bond hearings in order to get out temporarily while a case is pending, and then, of course, in their merits hearing to try to show that they're either not deportable or that they have a defense to deportation. There's really a wonderful ecosystem of organizations that is supporting us in this work. So a couple that you might have heard of, the Minnesota Freedom Fund, which has really been in the news lately a lot, and it really has done tremendous work to support immigrants and refugees, does a lot of work in supporting us and helping to pay bond for our immigrant and refugee clients. Second, there are a number of, I think, of faith-based organizations that are really working hard in order to support immigrants and refugees. There's an organization called Conversations with Friends that goes into detention centers in order to communicate and talk to folks. Also, there is another Minnesota Faith Coalition Against Detention that also does a lot of protesting at detention facilities, and also does a lot of support work. Yes, ICOM. Thank you. That's what I do that. So yes. And then Steve, you had a question about, so is it transparent who's there? By transparent, do you mean who is detained or who is there to support, who is there to advocate?
Who is detained?
Who's detained? Good question. Not necessarily. It can be very difficult oftentimes to find, to identify where somebody's family member is detained, in particular because there's a 1-800 number that can be called if you have the individual's alien registration number to figure out which detention facility they're at, but sometimes it doesn't get updated immediately. In addition, I was just mentioning that flight to Somalia. What you'll sometimes have is if somebody is, for example, been ordered deported, they might be trying to take lots of actions in order to stop themselves from being deported. For example, one of our clients had a stay of removal for a while, but ICE had moved them to Louisiana to get them, so that if the stay got lifted, they could try to deport them as soon as possible and before we had a chance to get back into court.
Yeah, and then more generally speaking, Steve, if your question at all addresses, is it possible to identify, like, say, the number of people who are immigration detainees in any particular facility? It is quite difficult to access that information unless you're filing a Freedom of Information Act request, which can take months to process. So it can be pretty challenging to get that information. So
agreed, Steve, you're right on.
Yep. So if there are other questions, please ask. But since we've got Veena here, we want to hear about all the secrets. So, like, what really is going on in immigration processes that maybe isn't in the news, but that you know about, that perhaps we should learn about too?
Yeah. One of the things that we talk a lot about kind of here is just about how the administration is really trying to end immigration through kind of the 1,000 cuts, or really through that building that invisible wall. And that's absolutely what's happening right now. So one of the things that, I mean, all of this is egregious, but somehow this really just got me going. So one of the things that immigration started to do probably about a year ago now is that they started with applications by people who are victims of violence for a special protection that's available to them because they've been victimized in the United States by a violent crime and have cooperated with law enforcement in the prosecution of that crime. For those cases alone, immigration decided to take the approach that if you had an application and left anything blank, so case in point, you don't have a middle name, there's a blank for a middle name, you don't fill it out. You just say Joe blank Smith. your application got rejected because you left a blank and did not put, NA, not applicable. This happened across the country. And when advocates complained about it, it's not that they changed it. Rather, they issued guidance saying, yes, in fact, if you don't put NA for every single blank, or then you are going to have your application rejected. So just absolutely asinine, and really just a completely crazy way to try to stop folks from getting a protection that they're entitled to. Another thing that's, I think, really, really important is just the lengthy delays that are happening at immigration. So for example, for folks who are trying to get work authorization right now, there are significant delays in both getting what's called approval notices saying, hey, you're approved, as well as the actual employment authorization document that shows that you're able to work and that employers rely on and that employers are required to verify in order to show that somebody is actually able to work. Now, just recently, one positive thing that happened is that immigration said that, and it's only because of a lawsuit, immigration said that you can use that approval notice, not just you don't have to have the card in order to show to your employer that you are employment authorized, but that's for a short period of time during COVID. And so a lot of folks who applied for their renewal months ahead of time are sitting here on pins and needles to figure out, am I going to lose my job because I haven't gotten an approval notice, or have I gotten this employment authorization card? So we're really, the service is really just holding people by hostage, and really causing anxiety where it's absolutely not necessary. Another situation that goes back to that situation of somebody who's a victim of crime or might have an approved petition. So one of the things, okay, so I'm going to take a one step back. This is where I get into Veena's storytelling, just to make sure that folks understand one really important part of the immigration system. So a lot of you have probably heard a lot of people who say, well, people should just get in that line and wait in that line to be able to immigrate. So let me tell you about the lines. When my dad sponsored my uncles and aunts to come to the United States, my grandparents come to the United States. For my grandparents to come here, very short time period. For my mom, when my dad was a lawful permanent resident, 3 months, he was so upset. He was calling Senators Mondale and Humphrey to get her here. But now that would take years. His brothers and sisters took about 5 years. Now, if you are the brother or sister of somebody who is a Indian citizen trying to come to the United States, who's sponsored by their U.S. citizen brother or sister, 20 years. If you are a victim of crime and have been determined to be somebody who's eligible to get a visa as a victim of crime, it can take you 3, 4, 5 years to get a visa. And also, again, using that India example, if you're somebody whose employer is trying to get you a green card here in the United States, and they were to apply for you today for a large category of employment-based green cards, if you apply today, it would take you 50 years to get your green card. So that's the line. So I just want to make very clear that this is a theoretical line. It's not a line that most people are going to get through in a reasonable part of their lifetimes. So that all being said, there's all of those issues. But even that U visa, let's be clear, 3 to 4 years. There's time there, and oftentimes people are moving through it. So what happens is there used to be a system that was used routinely in immigration court, where immigration judges, if they knew that you had a U visa pending, they knew that you had a petition through a family member pending, and one that was going to get adjudicated within a couple of years. What they would do is they would administratively close a case, because really what they said is, why should we keep this open? Why should we deport somebody so that they're going to be separated from their families, go over there, then have to go through an additional rigmarole of a process to come back here? Let's just close that case and let the benefit side catch up. Unfortunately, no longer. Under this administration, that technique, admin closure, is not being permitted. So that right now we're getting ready to submit an amicus brief in the case of a woman who is a victim of domestic violence, has been found to be prima facie eligible. She's got everything in. She is eligible. She's just waiting to get to that end of that line. And DHS wants to deport her. And I just think, what could be more contradictory to congressional intent to try to make sure to take the fear of deportation away from immigrant victims of crime than for the institution that's supposed to be adjudicating those benefits, for the one other side of that institution to then be trying to deport people. So those are the types of things that immigration has done to make it, into this administration has done to make it nearly impossible for immigrants and refugees to get through the process.
Wow, those are incredible anecdotes. And I think that they really motivate people to want to do something. So what would your suggestions be if people are motivated to act in this area with regard to what you've just said? And then I want to double back to with regard to immigrants in detention also.
Yep. Absolutely. So I would say, with regard to all of these different changes, one of the biggest things I would say is sign up for our action alerts. Our action alerts, we try very hard to keep folks abreast of some of these big changes. And they do two things for you, I think. One is that they'll send you those fact sheets so that you know about changes that are happening. And frankly, you might be able to apply them and use them for your for folks in your life or that you encounter who needs this assistance. But the second thing is that it gives, we're going to give you, Mari's going to post that URL for our action alerts in just a second. The other piece with regard to our action alerts is it gives folks, for example, template comments to submit to immigration in order to say that you're opposed to these changes. So one of the changes that's happening right now is with regard to the procedures for immigration courts to really eliminate a lot of protections for due process. We're just in the process of finishing up a comment that will be something that more of the general public will be able to fill out and send in. And so if you sign up for our action alerts, you can sign up today through that URL. We'll get those sent out to you so that you can put in a little information about why you care about this issue and get those alerts to the administration. And well, can I promise that they're going to maybe necessarily change their mind? Not necessarily, but let me tell you, one of the great things about comments, they're obligated to read them and to address them. So if we can inundate them with comments, that's one way to delay the implementation of really, really unfair and unjust policies.
Wonderful. Thank you. You know, there's some additional information regarding people in detention and how people who have expertise in specific areas can be involved in advocacy on behalf of people who are detained. Could you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that when it comes to detention, it's, there's so many different folks who can really get involved and support folks. So one of the things that we're always looking for is oftentimes one of the reasons that people are in detention is the same reason that people end up in our criminal justice system. And that's because we don't have, as a community, a system for assisting folks with addiction. So that is one thing we're oftentimes looking for professionals who can do evaluations, provide support for individuals. So that's one way that immigration lawyers are always looking for folks. Oftentimes there's a need to do mental health evaluations about trauma, for example, for folks who are applying for asylum, etc. So if those are things that you're interested in, what I would say is I'm going to put up my information in just a few minutes. Please just email me and I'll be able to try to get you in touch with folks who will be able to get you with the right attorneys and right organizations that can utilize your volunteer services. One organization that I know does great trainings on it, and Michelle, you might know if this is the way if we should send folks directly to them, but the Binger Center at the University of Minnesota has done some fantastic trainings to educate particularly medical professionals about how to support individuals in detention. So that's just a really good resource there. Oh, Michelle, can you unmute?
Sorry, I was muted. I did want to say that with regard to the Binger Center for New Americans, if there are medical professionals who are interested in being connected with Binger, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm in contact with Kathy Mocho, who's an attorney at the Binger Center, as well as several medical professionals who have been very involved in immigrant advocacy. So I'll put my information in the chat as well. Okay, so I guess I'm gonna pause for another moment. We're at 8:19, so if people have questions that they want to ask about all of the information, all the very valuable information that Veena has shared, or Veena, if you can think of any last things that you want to make sure to communicate today while I'm not multitasking here. And just putting my contact information in the chat, please.
Do you want me to share those slides now about your upcoming event and maybe?
Yeah, no, that would be, yeah, and that would be great if you want to start putting those up. And then actually, you know what, if folks don't mind being put on the spot for like a second, just because I think the nice thing is we have an intimate group here. So we might not have an intimate group that gets to hang out together. Like you know, I'd love to be visiting you guys in Linden Hills. I love your neighborhood. I live in St. Paul and Mac Groveland, and I don't get over there nearly as much as I want to. But that doesn't mean we can't have conversations. So if each person might be able to just for a minute, just say what made you come here tonight. What interested in you in this topic and made you care about this topic. I'd love to get to know you a little bit better.
I'll start. Okay. Becky got me interested in this. I'm on the Linden Hills Neighborhood Council board. Okay. And Becky, I don't know if I think she met Michelle and, you know, was pretty excited about her and the work that she was doing. And that has interested me, and our goal is to learn more about what's really going on and figure out where as individuals or as a group we can fit in and become more active. That's the reason. Okay, so.
Go ahead, Eliana. Don't hold back.
Hi, everybody. I came because I have a few friends who are undocumented immigrants, and they're important people to me, and I feel like I should know more about immigration in general. And this has been so informative and helpful, and I'm really happy that this event took place. So thank you.
Thanks for coming, Eliana.
So I came because I've known some undocumented immigrants since I was a kid who are now citizens, and their kids are citizens. And then when I did my master's degree, I did agriculture was one of the fields. And we spent time out in California talking to farmers. We did farmers and slaughterhouses. So if you just think about the food we eat and look at your plate, how much of it comes from undocumented immigrants or people that are documented with other documents. But the reality is we wouldn't be a country without immigrants. So we, owe it to all of them to support them. That's it.
Thanks, Steve. Right on, and so right on right now when we think about how many of our essential workers in our food supply are immigrants, are refugees, and are absolutely at such high risk right now for COVID and so many other types of so much because they're working hard to feed us.
I'm on the neighborhood council, so I'm here because of that, and because 3 of my 4 grandparents were immigrants to the United States a very long time ago. And I tried to convince my ex-husband and my daughter, both of whom are lawyers and both of whom speak multiple languages, to come listen tonight, but they didn't. So I'm going to report back to them on some volunteer opportunities for them. So.
Well, it's recorded, so you can just send them the link.
True, thank you.
Absolutely. That sounds great. We look forward to meeting them.
Thank you. And I see Melissa put something into the chat, which I can read unless you'd like to read it yourself, Melissa. But I'll go ahead and read it if you like. I'm for the humane treatment of all people and want to have a better understanding of people in all walks of life and want to know what's really going on in my community and in the world. Thank you.
Great. Becky, how about you?
You know, I really related to you when you said you read something and it just made you go red. And I think, you know, in this day and age, there's so much that you read that makes you go red. And then I met Michelle, and I realized she was an office of one doing really important work. That kind of, when you feel that feeling of anger or frustration at these large issues that you don't really know what to do with, then I just start thinking about the small steps. What are the small steps that I can take to change that, in even a small way? And so when I met Michelle and she shared what she was working on, it just felt like, okay, how can we help you? We are all in this together. We are in this city together. And so, you know, in our small way, you know, that is what we're trying to do, is just to help Michelle and you in your really important work, if only just to educate and make the audience broader. I really loved the part where you talked about the things that we're not even hearing about. So there's these atrocious things that we do hear about, and then there's even another level. And I think that's just so important to get it out so that people know and people can take action. So thank you, guys.
Yes, thank you too. And it's great to have connections, and making these connections is so meaningful. So thank you all so much for being here. And Eliana included a comment about your friend Carla, who wrote a book called The Undocumented Americans.
I totally have to, you know, is a funny segue, which Eliana does not even realize, into what I'm going to talk about in just a second. I'm totally stealing this from you, Michelle, because I'm about to like totally use it as my fun segue into my slide and then make an ask of Eliana. Becky, do you have our slides? Cool. So this is like, Eliana, I really feel like you're a plant. So if there was some sort of plant that was planned, we'll have to figure that out. So one of the things that we are thrilled about as an organization is that in this time, we want to make sure that we're staying connected with folks, making sure that people are still feeling like they're understanding and learning about immigration in their own homes. So we're kicking off an author series on October 8th. It's called Perspectives Writers on Immigration. Funnily enough, I was trying to figure out who we should ask first to speak. And the two people I was thinking the most about, not that I knew either of them, I was really going to just like, you know, all I did is like email their publishers, were Gia Lynn, who I'm going to tell you about in a second. And the second was Carla, the author of The Undocumented Americans, which I have not gotten to read yet. It is on my list. It's like the next one after this one, because, well, this book I have to have read in a couple of weeks for this event. But it's on my list. I might have to connect with Eliana off of this to see if maybe Carla might want to hang out with some folks from Minnesota on Zoom, because we'd love to have her as well. But I will tell you first about our first event, which is coming up. It hasn't even actually happened yet, which is going to be a wonderful discussion with Gia Lynn Yang, who is the Deputy National Editor of the New York Times, and is the author of a new book, One Mighty and Irresistible Tide, The Epic Struggle Over American Immigration, 1924 to 1965. So I'm about a third of the way in. It's a really great book, really interesting, especially because Gia Lynn, like my family, her family is here because of her 1965 act, and that's why my family is here. That act was passed actually on October 3rd of 1965. So our event is going to be happening the week of the 55th anniversary of the Immigration and Nationality Act. And I will tell you, if you want to understand the underpinnings of the immigration system right now, you want to understand the INA, and you want to understand the lead up to the INA. And one of the things I think that's amazing about this first couple of chapters that I'm reading of her book is how much she's talking about the early 20s when the Immigration Act at that time got passed that established actually a racial quota system for immigration in the United States. And you think about that, you think about Jim Crow, and her book, just as I'm looking at it, just really captures and shows us, I think, how so much so much racist rhetoric, racist policies underlied so many policies that were established in our country, including our immigration policy. And I think also I expect to see is an understanding of how, in her book, the INA was passed right after the Civil Rights Act. And I think in a lot of ways, they are both statutes and laws that create a lot of hope for communities, but left a lot of issues unaddressed, especially some of the remnants of racism, remnants of exclusion that are still embodied in our law. So I think you'll really love hearing from Gia Lynn. I think it'll get you a really great understanding of these issues. And we're also really excited about the event because it's actually a replacement for our gala, which we usually have at this time every couple of years. So we're hoping that it will be a great way for people to learn and also to be able to support our work. On the next slide, I've also got some information about just ways that you can help, and they really are information that we've shared throughout the event, but it's staying informed, joining our action network, and we've got the information there. Please volunteer. There's lots of different opportunities we have. Please donate. We really appreciate any investment and support of our work to help those 4,500 and those 4,500 cases we do each year. So helping DACAs, helping people to naturalize and to be able to vote, helping victims of domestic violence. All of you in our communities help power that. And then vote, 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 vote. When in the election. And then also on a little other way, I know you're probably all members of the Linden Hills Co-op, which I love too, but we're going to be actually starting in the first 2 weeks of October, we're going to be one of the organizations that is up to be selected for the Round Up campaign for the Seward Co-op. So if you also happen to be members of Seward, or you can vote or encourage your friends and family to vote, vote for us too to get support from the community. The next slide has some information so that if you have friends or family that need assistance from ILCN that they can connect with. Oh, you know what? Did I just give you my virtual business card? I might have. Information about how to get assistance from us is on our website. And then here's my virtual business card. As I said to Becky, I want to make this as much as possible like a real event. And if it were a real event, I get to know you. And I give you my business card and you give me yours, and then we get to have coffee afterwards. So this is my way of trying to have that interaction with you. So here's my virtual business card. I hope you will take me up on emailing me or giving me a call to perhaps grab a virtual coffee or a physically distanced coffee or tea. Actually, I'm more of a tea drinker. And get to know one another and how we might be able to work together.
And I'll make sure that all the information on those slides, everyone, and all the information in the chat will be available to the participants tonight. Also, anybody who registered tonight but couldn't make it. I will make sure that that information gets out.
And Becky, did you say also the slides that she just put up?
Yes, I'll make sure.
Would be on the same. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. This was really wonderfully informative and horrifying at the same time. Okay, gotta say that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you both for what you do.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. And happy Citizenship Day.
Happy Citizenship Day.
Happy Citizenship Day. Yes, so everyone, thank you for coming tonight. And if you have any questions, we'll make sure that you can contact Michelle or Veena or even myself. And make sure to spread the word. We'll also be sending this video to you and posting it on our website so that friends, family, colleagues who are also interested in helping. I know there's a lot